Welcome back to the Sean Trey Show, and I've got an awesome. This is a special segment that we're going to be actually working on over the next year, and I've got a friend with me. Now, would you like to introduce yourself to people and tell people who you are and what you do?
Yeah, sure. My name is Chris Lee, and I am a former Special Forces operator from the United States Army. I'm now a high performance coach for folks, and I'm honored to be here. Thanks
It's
for having me
awesome, man.
back.
Well, it's awesome to have you, and we kind of were chatting outside of off the air, and we kind of came up with this concept of doing a men's series that we talk about some concepts for the gents, for the guys out there. But it's in content and information that can benefit anyone. But some of these ideas I think are really things that I had a gentleman on the other day to my podcast, and his whole thing is he is the Instagram stepdad, and so he goes online, and on Instagram he teaches people how to do stuff. Like, you didn't grow up with a father, and I'm going to talk to you about how to change a light bulb, how we're going to change a car tire, how we're going to do all this stuff. And it's pretty awesome because he's got this huge following where he can really
Great.
make an impact. And there's a lot of people that are doing these things that are talking to people about how to do stuff that you might not learn. For me, like, how do you sand a paint off of something? Like, that some people learned that growing up. I didn't. But for these other concepts are more esoteric. Like an idea of how to, and there's a lot of stigma on this right now about how to be a man. And people are like, it's people mumbling and grumbling about that. But the reality is if people are out there talking about toxic masculinity, then we sure as hell better talk about what positive masculinity is. What does it mean to be a guy in a positive way? And we have to talk about it. There was something that we touched on in the last conversation we had that kind of kicked this off as well, where you were talking about when you saw someone that was calm in a room, for special forces. You walk into a room and you see someone that's calm. There was a great clip on Instagram that I watched earlier tonight, and it was of this brawl outside a club, and there were these guys that were pushing, posturing, just all in people's faces. And 2 seconds later, there was this guy pushed one, and the guy that like this guy who was like, "I'll kick your ass, I'll kick your butt, man, I will mess you up." And there was one guy that just walked up from behind. He was really quiet, big guy, chubby, unassuming, not a lot of people paying attention to him. Just walked up. The guy turned on him, and 2 seconds later, the kid's laying on the sidewalk, just like out cold. What no one knew is that boxer was a former heavyweight champion, and he just now was working as a bouncer. And this kid didn't know that, and he came up on him, and the man was like, "Please back away, please back away." And the kid took a swing on this guy and just went boom, and he was out cold. And it wasn't excessive violence. It was just literally a well-timed, well-placed punch. It wasn't full force. He wasn't, going down and beating him up. Just like, boom, knockout. And it was that, and you can see it. I'm a huge fan of the UFC, and you can see it in fights. There's these guys that are just like, oh, tense and going at someone. And then you get someone like, I used to love watching Anderson Silva fight, because prime Anderson Silva moved like that ring was nothing to him. Like, it was just like, just he was there and just having a little bit of fun, or Muhammad Ali back in the day. Muhammad Ali just was so cool under pressure, people swinging at him, and he's just like, no one hitting him, because it was that calmness. Now, talk to me about this. You were the one who brought that whole topic up. Tell me more about that.
Sure. Yeah, I think I was trying to kind of flesh out what it means to be calm, and like where that calmness would actually come from. And kind of from our conversations, both last time I was on your show and kind of in between, I think it is entirely this knowledge of self, like self-awareness. That's where I think it kind of derives from, because having complete understanding of self, you don't need to posture. You're not trying to prove anything for anybody. You know what I mean? It's all about understanding exactly what you're capable of and what you're willing to do, and that's what drives the attitude of like, I don't have anything to prove to anybody, but if chaos shows up, I know how to handle it. And ultimately that's what I'm striving for. I say this sometimes, like, I'm fluent in the language of violence, but I don't have to use it. I've never been in a street fight, or I typically just get along with folks,
right.
And and I'm okay with that now. But going through the training that I've been through, and like kind of understanding how things work, I guess, in the world, I'm pretty confident in my ability to deal with chaos as it shows up. But it's not something that I don't know. It's not something I try to advertise either.
Yeah. It's not something you seek out.
And I think,
you know what I mean?
Exactly. I'm not looking for a fight ever.
Right.
But I do think it's important to be prepared for one. There's Dr. Jordan Peterson talks about this. I've heard him like on YouTube or Instagram or something, and he references a piece of scripture where Jesus was saying, "The meek shall inherit the earth," and we've poorly translated the word meek. Meek does not equate to weak or timid, but rather he describes it as someone who has a sword, knows how to use it, but keeps it sheathed. They shall inherit the earth. And I like that. I like that analogy way better, because it's somebody that has the capacity for violence but chooses not to be violent.
This is something
I like that a lot.
I like that, and I love that you bring that up, because I was sitting there stewing on this topic before we were getting on here. I was thinking about this all day, and about where did because I love my dad, but there's a major difference. One of the big differences between my dad and I is I'm trying to figure out how to say this. First of all, I'm going to say that my father, I think, is one of the best men I've ever met. He's one of the, he is a good man. And there's not many people I can say that about. My dad is the type of guy who would take his shirt off his back and give it to anyone. He would help anyone. He is a good, godly man, But yet, there was something about the difference between us. And one of the things is my father is a very devout Christian, and we would go to church all the time. And I feel like at the churches that we went to, there was this emphasis of Christ almost being soft, too soft.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Right.
And like there was this idea of almost like purging this aggression from our space. You know what I mean? And it's like, and so I felt, and I remember when I was a kid, I was not good at sports, but one of the things that I was always good at, and I have always been good at, I'm good at martial arts. I'm good at fighting. I like fighting.
That's awesome.
You know what I mean? I'm not, UFC fighter, but I have good timing. I have good, reactions. And I was a clumsy guy, but when I was in Taekwondo class as a little kid, that was something that came naturally to me. I felt it, and I would just be really good timing. I'd be winning the bouts that I was in as a little kid. And yet my father and mother, my parents didn't have me continue. And then years later, I found a martial arts group that was awesome group of people that I kind of joined in with and got into it. And my dad was the people that introduced me to them, which was, I could thank him for that. But yet there was this idea of, I felt like in a lot of the tradition I came from, that this not violence, because I don't like that, but this ability to use aggression or power was looked down upon because it wasn't there for Christ. And I always I love the one story, to counter that of Christ when he goes to the temple and people and he takes out he is. Let's be real. I've been to a market before. Can you imagine someone going to a market and just upending the stalls? That is not a minor thing to do. That is pretty serious,
Yeah. No, I totally agree. And I studied religion in college for my undergrad for a number of years. And I remember in one of my classes, when Jesus talks about if someone strikes you on your right cheek, turn your other cheek to them.
Yep.
So when I was studying, my professor was telling us that there might be an alternative interpretation of what was going on there. So when Jesus was saying, if someone strikes you on your right cheek, if you kind of put the characters into position, that would require somebody to backhand you. And so when Jesus says, turn your other cheek to them, it isn't so they can hit you again. It's to tell them that if you're going to hit me, you're going to hit me forehand like a man. I'm not a dog that you can strike. I'm an adult that you will contend with. And I thought that was an interesting interpretation, as opposed to just bowing down to violence being imposed upon you.
Right. And that's one of the things that I always thought about too, because I always thought about that Bruce Lee, I mean, I'm not trying to compare Jesus Christ to Bruce Lee, but the concept of, when Bruce Lee got smacked and he was like, this one too, like, come on, it's like, hit me here. Right, yeah. I got this side too, there is that strength in it, and that strength to it. And again, it's an interesting flip side, because what we're looking at is the fact that you don't seek out violence, you don't seek out aggression, you don't seek these things out. But there is a time. One of my friends is a former Navy SEAL, and we had this discussion one time when he was, down at Miramar, or not Miramar, at Coronado. And and we were living together. We were roommates in the same house, and he was my brother's best friend still. And he and I had different political views at that time. And there was one point where we had gotten to this discussion, and he came up to me and said, "There are bad people out there that you don't know about, and you have the freedom to believe what you believe because people like me take actions toward those people." Yeah. And one of the things that struck me was that, I love going back to look at stories of like World War II, where it was very clear that the Nazi forces in Europe were bad. What the Japanese were doing.
Right.
If you look at the rape of Nanking, if you look at like what was committed, this was bad. And what was happening when the call was answered? Jocko Willink posted this thing the other day, and I want to save it for later. But if not me, then who? People have to step up, and there is a place for this response. And I think that we have to remember that it's not all the time. We're not. And that's kind of where the calmest man in the room comes in. But there is a time and a place for action. For action, whatever that might be. That might be that you're running into a building and grabbing people and running out. But there's a time and place for action.
Exactly. No, I 100% agree. And I think it really, in this particular vein, as we're kind of traveling down this conversation, it's like being prepared to do something doesn't necessarily mean you have to do something, but being prepared is way better than not being prepared.
Right.
Having the skills and the tools in your tool belt is significantly more valuable and allows you to stay calm because you have tools to choose from if chaos arises. And yeah, I think that's where the calm comes in too. Is you're not really reacting to the chaos. You are choosing which action to take because you have options now. And those options are more than just panic. So.
And we're talking, and I've been talking about violence and martial arts and things like this. But let's be real. Like, I love that what you just said. When chaos arises, not violence, not a situation that someone cuts you off in traffic. I think some of the places that my martial arts training has come in most and keeping calm under pressure was raising my daughter. When my daughter ate something or had stomach flu and it started coming out both ends at the same time, and my head is like, you're just it's shooting in both directions, and I'm just like, must get to the toilet. We're as close as possible, and I just pick her up,
exactly.
Get to that position, aim the head down, point the back end in a different direction, and we, and it's just like keeping calm under pressure, and being ready for whatever that chaos might be. So here's the question: how does one be the calmest person in the room, the calmest man in the room? How do we do it?
It's an excellent question, and I think there's a couple different approaches to it. We used to say often, you won't rise to the level of your aspiration. You will sink to the level of your training. My youngest, she was probably 6 at the time. We have a trampoline in the backyard, and she took a swan dive off that thing and face planted on our deck. And I was sitting right there. She was just trying to get off the trampoline. It has one of those net things around it too, but she had unzipped the thing and just like fell off and smashed her face on the deck. She starts crying immediately. So I look over at her, I pick her up, I take her inside. I was one of the medics on my team, and so I was kind of going through like neurological exam and checking for skull fracture and stuff like that. But about that time, the wife comes in and she's like kind of freaking out, and I'm like, that isn't helpful right now. So either step aside or calm down. Because the way I was viewing it is as heart-wrenching as it was, because it was my little girl. It was a problem I needed to solve.
Yes,
because solving the problem was the most important at the time, and to ensure that she was okay. And I can freak out later.
Yes,
but the problem is right in front of me, And so back to your question, how do you get that calm? I think a lot of it has to do. I think I was able to remain calm because I had a lot of medical training, and I had like a process in my head that I was going to go through.
Yes.
To try to work through it. Um, so, but not everybody has access to like intense medical training. But I mean, you can learn some things.
Yes.
I mean, CPR classes or learning how to properly do like the Heimlich maneuver, stuff like that is important, and it's a perishable skill if you don't train on it and practice it too. So I think that's one example.
There was something that you said there. There's a couple. There's a lot of gems right there. Um, one of the first things is I want to go on and tap into something, and this is I'm a big fan of Ryan Holiday. I'm a big fan of the whole neo stoicism movement. I even enjoy the broicism. You know, that's how whatever comes, whatever way, shape, or form. But if you go to Epictetus, you know, one of the ancient teachers of ancient Greece, I believe, Epictetus had the idea of the dichotomy of control. The dichotomy of control is what can I control and what can I not control. And that's one of the things too for me that like one of the first things I start with is when I get into a situation that is getting bad or things start, you know, hitting the excrement starts hitting the fan, so to say. As different things start going wrong, I try to start mentally compartmentalizing. You know, is this something that I can fix? Like, and going back to your problem analogy, is this something I can fix? And is this a priority? You know, we had a similar situation where my daughter was playing in my room right here, and her cousin shoved her off of the couch, fell backwards, bumped her head, and you know, at first she was like crying, and I was like, you know, what do we do? Let's check her out. We checked her vitals. We started checking everything, and everything seemed fine. Looking at her eyes, checking for concussions, everything was fine. And I told my wife, and my wife was really stressed out, you know, really freaking out. And I was like, you know, at this moment, there's nothing we can do. Start monitoring her vitals, keeping an eye on her. If anything changes, we immediately go to the ER. And sure enough, a couple of hours later, she started feeling nauseous and vomiting. And my wife's like, is it okay? Should we stay home? So that I said, no, we're going immediately to the ER. Got to the ER, and she had a subdural hematoma. You know, just a little tiny buildup of blood between the brain and the skull. And she was okay. She recovered fine. Everything was okay. But they gave her medications that were able to treat that. You know, and it's like, it was not something that, you know, if we had have freaked out, if we had have overreacted, you know, if we had have gone to the ER too early, it might not have shown anything. You know, they might have done the CAT scan or did a CAT scan. They might have done the CAT scan and it didn't show anything because it hadn't had time to build up at that point. You know, it was an hour later that we got in there, and it was about being present in that moment, and also just figuring out, all right, what do I have control over? You know, imagine you're driving down the road and, you know, it's a cold day and there's black ice. Well, I can't control the fact that there's black ice. I can beforehand make sure that I have good tires on. You know, that's something that could have leading up. I can slow down in the car. I can adjust my headlights in a way so that, you know, I don't know if you need highs or lows for black ice, but, you know, slowing down is probably one of the most important things. And, you know, if in any way, shape, or form I can prevent driving at night, that's even better, you know. And there are things that you can do to prepare for that. But that's one of the first things that I think is always helpful for me. Dichotomy of control.
Yeah, and you're spot on, and I think we as a society have developed a habit of um, getting overwhelmed with stuff, and most of it is outside of our control, and that's not good training, because when it does hit the fan, you're so used to trying to absorb all this stuff that's outside of your realm of expertise or your control at all,
Right.
that you're unable to act. Whereas if you have developed a habit of separating the world into things you can influence and things you can't, yeah, when the chaos shows up, you can do kind of a quick assessment, like, all right, what can I do? Let's do that. You know.
Yeah. and that's the thing too, is like, um, it's not your expertise. And that's another thing that I like that you just said in that point before with training. That was one of the things that impressed me about like, I know that the job was high risk and high stress, but my friend that was a Navy SEAL, he was always training, and it was really cool stuff half the time. It's like, what
Right.
did you
Yeah.
do today? Well, I learned how to drive a car like this with my foot on the glass, holding the door open with my left foot and shooting, a gun out the front. I was like, that's insane, and it's like, I was like,
Right.
it's like, well, that's, you train for it, because you never know what's going to come. And I think this is one of the important things of training, and whatever it might be that you need to train. Let's imagine that you are, I remember a moment that I froze up, and I trained, but it still wasn't something I was prepped for. Um, I had done lifeguard training. I'm a very good swimmer, and I did lifeguard training at my school. And the first time that I was working as a lifeguard was on a 4th of July weekend. It was at the
Oh
college
yeah.
pool that I was at,
Pack.
and I'm watching, and it was a good shift. Everything was chill. Kids were diving off the swimming pool, diving board. And then all of a sudden, there was one kid. I was like, is he struggling? Is he struggling? Is he struggling? And that was the thing, though, is by the time that I recognized he was struggling, he was already going under. And the other lifeguard was
Right.
in, and she was on it, and she was seasoned, and she had been there, and she had just had rescued hundreds of kids, already at this
Right.
point. And she knew, she instinctively saw the way that he was, his head was struggling to stay above water. She pulled him out. And I asked her, I was like, how did you know? And she said, practice. I've been there.
Yeah.
I've seen
Exactly.
it.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? It's just like, and I was like beating myself up. I was like, oh, I had that feeling. And she's like, and next time you'll trust it. And next time you'll trust it
Yeah.
because you've prepped and you're listening to it. And that's where
Yeah.
practice is so invaluable. Practicing and preparing for whatever skill it is that you need.
Yeah. No, I 100% agree. And um, so I was a Green Beret, and we trained alongside infantrymen, to kind of bolster their skill set too. Um, but they sometimes ask, like, what makes you special forces? Like, what sets you apart? And some guys think it's like all the cool gear we get to play with, or all the fancy training, like driving in normal cars and shooting out the windshield, and we're fast roping out of helicopters or whatever. I, that's really not the case. We get to do that stuff because we've mastered the basics. And
Right.
there's a difference between training on the basics and mastering them. When you get to the point where you and your team can clear a house without really talking to each other, because you know body language and you know everyone's job and you know exactly what everyone's going to do. Um, that's like a level of mastery uh, versus like trying to kick in the door and then like trying to have a conversation about what do we do next. No, it's like you've trained on
Yeah.
this, but you haven't mastered it. You know what I mean? And kind of going back to your story, is it seems like your colleague had mastered that skill set, because it's not only learning how to swim and like swim somebody back to the shore or whatever, but it's recognizing the signs of I don't know, imminent threat or danger.
Right.
And now after that experience, you've achieved another level of mastery in your own skill set.
I trained with a martial arts school that my teacher loved to show us lots of different techniques. And we would have, hundreds of different throws, and we practiced them, but there were some that I didn't practice that much. And I remember one day I met a kid who was a judo black belt from Kodokan, from the school in Tokyo, like the
That's
original
awesome.
school.
Yeah.
It was rad, right? And he was a really nice guy. And one day, um, we came in and we were practicing a little randori, practicing some throws on each other, and he's like, "Hey, you want to go for it?" And I was like, "Oh, sweet, let's have some fun, man." And I
Yeah,
kept
yeah,
trying all these different throws on him, trying to get inside on him, and he stifled everything I threw at him because he was so used to it. And then, without thinking, in a blink of a second, I was on my back. I was just like, "Whoa, whoa, where did that come from?" We had this conversation after class, and he talked to me about that. He's like, you guys practice some awesome throws. I didn't know some of these. He's like, these are really cool. And he's like, yeah, this is stuff you showed me, and we're trying it. The land was really cool. He said, I have one throw.
Right.
I have one throw, and I'm really good at it. And I was like, yeah, no. He's like, no. I have one throw, but I practiced that one throw a million times, and I will get you with it. I will. Like, it is not a question of if. He will. It's just a matter of time. And I mean, of course, he knew more than that, but he was a specialist on this one technique,
Right.
and he would get anyone. And he would wait. It was a waiting game. And it coming back to, he stayed calm. He knew how to weather other people's offense until the moment where it was time. And then boom, he'd drop you.
And that goes back to that self-awareness, knowing your level of capability and having complete trust. Like, I bet he was super calm the whole time you guys
Always.
were sparring. Right. He was just waiting. He was just waiting for his time, and then hit you with his one move. It's awesome.
It is. And I think that's and I think that's kind of as well. The comes back to the preparation. It was he had his 10,000 hours. He had his 10,000 hours in of whatever it was, that one technique that he had, and he was an expert in it. And I think that's something that we tend to downplay, is, again, that practice of, and I love watching, what was it? I loved watching, one of my favorite movies is John Wick. A guy can kill a whole room with a pencil, right? But why was John Wick such a great movie? Because Keanu took the time to train. Keanu took the time to go in and actually learn how to hold a handgun. I was watching, there's this new movie on Netflix called Treason. And it's the guy, I love it. What's his name? I didn't love the show. I love the actor. He played Daredevil in the most recent Daredevil. Charlie Cox, I think it is.
Oh, okay.
Great actor. And yet this movie was about MI6 and like their spy network. And watching the whole thing, and like suddenly there's like he becomes this young head of MI6, and he keeps sneaking off from his security detail. And I was like, there's no way in hell that the head of MI6 could sneak away from his security detail in the middle of the night to go meet up with people in random buildings. I was like, this is not going to happen, it's not going to happen. And one of the things that was so believable about John Wick was the fact that Keanu himself, and you watch the videos, he's out at the range and he's literally learning how to use each of the weapons correctly, and he was doing some speed, skills stuff, switching from shotgun, switching to handgun, then moving up to an automatic rifle. And it was like, wow, that's impressive, putting in the time so that when he has to go and do it in acting, he's prepared.
Right. And it looks real too. On that vein, you can tell when somebody's held a weapon before in any kind of professional setting versus like somebody that's just picking it up as a prop, and it makes me vomit. Like their lack of like trigger discipline and flagging people as they're walking around stuff drives me bonkers. But that comes from like my experience of like it being ingrained in my head that you have to be incredibly safe with these tools, and so I 100% agree. Like the time that Keanu spent on the range learning how to appropriately manipulate those weapon systems, it translated into the movie, and it made it significantly better because it was real. He was actually using the weapons properly, which was great.
Right. Now, what else? What else would you say? What are some other ways that a person could cultivate or develop this skill set? And I feel like
Yeah,
we
I
got
think,
Liam Neeson sitting in the corner here. Have a certain set of skills.
yeah, exactly. Um, I think for my own journey, meditation is, I'm trying to integrate that more into my life. I even took on a meditation coach to kind of help me stay more consistent and do things properly. Um, I had read a quote a long time ago that said, everyone should meditate for 15 minutes a day. And if you don't have time to meditate for 15 minutes, you should meditate for an hour. Um, and and I think for for me, meditation will eventually become a superpower. I firmly believe that because it is the deliberate practice of sitting in stillness and being calm. And if that becomes a daily practice, um, it then becomes second nature, and is again one more tool in your tool belt when chaos shows up. Um, Deliberately practicing calming your mind, particularly nowadays when there's so much distraction. And I know that's super cliche to say, but like it is what it is. But spending time to deliberately calm your mind sitting in stillness with just yourself is a skill set that not many people have the patience for, but is so important and so um, in my view, uh, it's so necessary nowadays because I don't want to just be the average person that's addicted to their phone anymore.
Right.
I want to have the mental capacity to separate myself from like the dopamine fix that I can get from scrolling.
Right.
Um,
There's a
so to answer your question, yeah, I think meditation for sure.
I see it so much, and people like just walking down the street. I saw some guy walk into a pole yesterday. Jeez, come on, man. But there's a great book
Yeah.
for anybody who might be listening who wants to dive into meditation, because I know some people, there are still some people that have a hard time separating out meditation from the idea of different spirituality systems behind it. If you want to read it, it's a phenomenal book that dives into this topic and just is done by some amazing people. Read, it's called The Buddha's Brain, The Practical Neuroscience of Mindfulness. And it's written
Mm-hmm.
by some MDs, two doctors that are also experts on mindfulness. And the whole book is looking at how the way the brain is wired and talking about why we need to practice mindfulness. And it goes way back because we think of the upper brain, right? The neocortex. It's our higher brain. And that part of the brain makes us smart, makes us savvy, allows us to tell jokes and fun things like that, create art. But that lower, part of the brain, the midbrain, is very much an animal brain, and very much a brain that's still. My daughter has two pet guinea pigs. And they hate being picked up from above because things that pick them up from above eat them. It's like talons, things that bite them. And they're the cutest little animals, bitchy as hell, but they're adorable little things. And they're sweet. They'll start chirping at you. They want food, but then you get too close to them and they'll try to kick you. They're funny like that. But their brain is wired toward staying away from things that can eat them. And our brains are too, to a degree. We still have that programmed into us. The book goes into why. The why is actually pretty cool, right? If you our pleasure seeking part is not as strong as the avoiding pain. And why is that? Well, if I see a possible potential mate going down the street and I miss my opportunity, there will probably be more opportunities. If I miss a meal,
Yeah.
there will probably be more opportunities to get that meal. So when we do not get that dopamine release, the brain doesn't punish us as much. However,
Right.
our avoidance part of our brain is way stronger because if we don't run from the dinosaur, it will dismember us. It will feed
Right.
us.
Right.
You know, and it's like, think about that. Like,
Yeah.
there was a video online today that I was watching on Instagram. And all it was like someone put a stupid caption, the ghost came running up the stairs. And they're filming down their stairs. And then the camera turns around and it's a camera like aimed down into a basement. And
Right.
I don't know anything about their house. It seems like it was just a
Yeah.
basement with the light off. But damn, that was a terrifying. I looked in that basement and I was just like, every last childhood fear. Like, there is some horrible
Yeah.
stuff
Yeah.
down there that will kill and dismember me.
The unknown. Yeah.
And you know, and it's like that part of the brain was just like ding, and that part of the brain is constantly activated in our daily life. The boss that I used to have this boss that would peek through a window and watch me. Literally the worst boss ever, man. She terrified me. And I started getting stress
Yeah.
conditions working there because I needed the money, but yet I didn't know
Yeah.
when I was being watched. And it gave me constant anxiety. And that fills up in our life, you know, and we're overwhelmed.
Mhm. Yeah. No, I'm going to check that book out. That sounds super interesting.
It's really good.
So yeah, that sounds great. And I think you're right. I think it's important for people to understand that there is like physiological changes that take place when you begin the practice of meditation. And it doesn't necessarily have to be a spiritual thing. For particularly with like, I grew up pretty conservative Christian, and the idea of meditation was kind of frowned upon, particularly like Eastern style meditation. And so, but I think missing out on that kind of skill set is a detriment because because again it's more of like a physiological shift that takes place, kind of a rewiring of the mind in a positive way. And again, imagine imagine uh, if every high schooler spent 30 minutes meditating,
Right?
and they can still play on their phone the rest of the time, but like if that was like an intentional practice that was cultivated at a young age, um, I don't know what kind of society could we have. A bunch of calm people walking around. How great would that be?
That'd be awesome. Well, you know, and I think that going back, last time I talked about one of the guys that was in my school that was a very skilled martial artist, and he was peaceful and as calm as could be because he he did have that training, he did have that preparedness, and he did practice meditation as well, and you could see it. There was just this peace, and when things came, this is one of the things that my friend who talked to me about meditation, the analogy they made, and I love this, right? We're all carrying a glass around. Each one of us has a glass. And that glass, for most of us, is pretty full. So when any extra water is poured in, it immediately spills. The more
Yeah,
that you can
yeah,
clean out your glass and pour it out so that you are carrying around less, the more that you can
yeah.
take. And so you can be having a ton of stuff dumped on you, and you're just like, I'm good. I'm good. There's
Right,
plenty of
exactly.
room in there. And, you know,
Yeah, that's
versus the days that
a
all
great
of us are
analogy.
stressed and you are feeling full, those are the days that you
Yeah,
need meditation more. And this is the thing. There was this great expert that I spoke with. I think his name was Robert Jempolsky. He was the expert on stress. He was the stress guy. And they did some studies on baboons. Horrible, not getting into the debate on ethics of animal testing. Um, but what they found is that when they induce stress in animals, these animals developed heart disease, they developed cancer, they developed all of these conditions. When the stress was
yeah,
removed, the animals returned to health just like that. They just started, cancer went into remission, heart disease went away. And that was the amazing power of the body to heal when there was no stress. And I'm at this lecture, everyone in the room's depressed. They're like, we're all going to die, because our lives are stressful. And I raised my hand, and I was on this kick at that time. I was like, yeah, yoga is like the thing. Yoga's great. I was like, yoga was awesome. I was like, is yoga the answer? And this guy's like, no, it's not. I was like, shattered. I was like, what they found, they could take, 65-year-old guy from, Louisiana, and they put him into a yoga class. He might have a heart attack in a week because it stresses him out. But they send that same guy to go fly fishing, or to go and, watch his weekly football game, or whatever it might be. That is his practice of kind of cleansing, of dumping. Yeah. And that person found health, right. And so it really is, your meditative practice can be going for a walk. Your meditative practice could be singing karaoke for an hour, as long as you are present.
As long as you are able to allow yourself to take time for yourself. Some people get riddled with guilt when they want to take a vacation, or
right.
When they want to go watch a movie or sit and meditate. They're like, well, I should be doing something else. And that should is just stress you're putting on yourself, denying yourself that healing time that you could be providing yourself, but like you've now bombarded it with, well, I should be doing this, or I should be doing that, or X, Y, Z, and it's, I think that's a mindset that needs to be adjusted as well. As we live in a world and a society where everyone thinks they should be doing something all the time, even to the point where you're neglecting sleep, which sleep is like one of the greatest healing factors in our life, and we neglect it so much. And I think you're onto something, like finding that whatever that meditation or that present thing you could be a part of is awesome. But you have to get to a point where you allow yourself to be present when you're enjoying it. I mean, how many times have you been on vacation and you're thinking about work? It's piling up while you're every time. Right, exactly. So and that's something I struggle with as well. Even as I try to engage in meditation, it's like my to-do list immediately turns on, and it's like, all right, well, okay, you're meditating, but you got to do this afterwards. Well, then I'm not really present. I'm already in the future. That's right. That's missing the whole point. And so it's this constant, like, all right, yep, I acknowledge that thought. Let's go back to the breath. Try to be present. And it's, for me, at least in my early part of this journey of meditating, it's this constant returning to the moment. And it's like every couple of seconds I have to return back to the breath, because my mind is just going crazy, and it takes practice, and it's uncomfortable, but I think it's good too.
I'm with you. There's one last thing that popped into my head, and it was something that I remember from my dad had said about this one guy he read about, Desmond Doss. There was a story about him, a movie made about him. Mel Gibson produced it, but Desmond Doss story, my dad told me about 15 years ago. And my dad was like, you gotta hear about this guy, Desmond Doss. My dad's wife's cousin produced a Desmond Doss documentary. And my dad kept saying, Terry's going to get this movie made in Hollywood. Terry's going to get this movie made in Hollywood. I was like, right, Dad, that's tough to make a movie in Hollywood. Lo and behold, he got the movie made, got Mel Gibson on board. And, and one of the stories is that guy was running through, it was in Okinawa, absolute scene of carnage, Hacksaw Ridge, was a place where the Japanese were entrenched. They had the superior position. They were, they had machine gunners that were just mowing down the Allied forces. Um, and Desmond Doss kept running out, grabbing people, lowering them back over the cliff. And I think it was 100+ people that he lowered to safety that day. And it always reminds me of that. I don't remember who I asked. I think it was one of my martial arts teachers. And I say, how do you deal with that fear that all of us have, that creeps in? And he said this, and this is, I think, something that I think is really important that is missing for a lot of people: a life of purpose. He said, if I draw breath, if I'm still drawing breath, there is something that my version of the divine, my higher power, has me here to do. And as long as I'm drawing breath, my job is not done. And this is one of the things that I know my father believes as well. He's I think about 78 right now. My dad is still working. He is not retired, and he will not retire, I don't believe, until
Right.
The day that he is done and his purpose is done. And that is the beauty of that, and was always inspired me. And I think that that's something that's so important too. Of there is a calmness. Why? Because I have a higher purpose in this life, and if it's my time to go, it's my time to go. And understanding. I mean, and this might be for bigger things. It might not help when your daughter's, vomiting and having explosive diarrhea at the same time. But yet, maybe at the same time, it does. To that level of faith. And maybe it's simply faith in your training, faith in your abilities. I think there is something about that idea of purpose is also important. Yeah, that was something that I've always respected about special forces guys as well. They're serving a higher purpose of protecting people, of national security. There is a higher force or a higher objective in mind.
Yeah, I agree. I think having some kind of firm grasp on your life's mission or your purpose will definitely help you weather storms, because it gives you a little bit of perspective. And it's like, all right, if my purpose is not fulfilled yet, whatever it is I'm going through, it's I'll get through it because I have things I need to do. It kind of gives you that, I don't know, long term perspective. So when the things that seem really big right now and today, you can take a step back and be like, all right, this isn't really that big compared to where I'm going and compared to the things I'm going to accomplish. And so I can separate myself from today's chaos and acknowledge it for what it is, and it's inconvenient and uncomfortable. But yeah, that purpose is keeping me on azimuth, and I'm on track now, and so I can weather this storm. I totally agree with you.
There was a great discussion I saw. I know Hollywood actors are not the most respected in some circles, but one of the coolest people I ever met, and a really, really interesting, down to earth guy, is Tom Hanks. I had the opportunity to work with him.
Oh,
really
cool.
nice guy, really cool guy.
Yeah.
There was this Hollywood roundtable, and Tom got really esoteric at one point in time. I don't even know why it popped up. There was a bunch of different people in the room, and they were asking Tom something, and his thing was like, one of the things that he likes to remember is, this too shall pass. This too shall pass. Whatever's going on, this too shall pass. And your job is not to freak out. Your job is to, again, going through what we've talked about, focus on your training, identify what you can control, what you can't control, remembering your higher power, your source. You've done your meditation. You are staying calm, and then remembering whatever's going on right now. At some point in time, will calm down, and
Yeah.
finding a way out. And this is the other thing too, is that most everything is a puzzle with a solution. There is most everything we encounter, as daunting as it may seem, is some type of puzzle that has a solution. You just have to find it.
Yeah. I 100% agree, and that's from my own experience. That's often how I approached my medical training and then medical scenarios that I was put in. It was um, some of the scenarios, the training scenarios that I was forced to go through were pretty stressful, and that was on purpose to simulate combat and stuff like that. Um, but the stress isn't real. You put it on yourself. And so if you can take that perspective where this is an interesting puzzle I get to solve, it it removes a great deal of that stress. Particularly if you know you have all the tools to solve the puzzle, you just have to figure it out. And so that goes back to the training and stuff. But you're absolutely right. It, having a just that different perspective of, yes, this is a catastrophe, but I have the tools to solve this catastrophe. So it's an interesting Rubik's cube, so to speak. So
It is, and I think and it almost becomes fun. It almost becomes fun to start navigating these. You know, there was a great quote. I don't remember if it was from Bruce Lee or someone else, but it says, "Don't ask God for an easy life. Ask him for a
right,
difficult one and the ability to weather it, the storm, or be able to get through it." And I think that's when you start working these skills, when you start looking at how to navigate challenging situations, whether it be, your child with explosive diarrhea, whether it be you're having a car that's, you have a blowout on the highway at high speed, or some other situation, whatever it might be, becomes an opportunity to see how awesome you can be. And that's something that I enjoy. Every single challenge you have, you know, I try to envision the toughest days I have in my imagination. I'm like, this is the moment where the cool music comes on. If this is the movie that is
right,
me, this is the moment where, like, they're like, yeah, he's beaten down, and that music comes on, like dun 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 dun
right.
dun 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 dun. I'm just like, yes, this is the moment where he gets up, he's picking himself up, and the hero's going to emerge.
Yeah. No, I really like that analogy too, because I an exercise I used to kind of give myself was, if they were going to make a movie about my life, what kind of movie would it be? Would it be a comedy or an action film, or I don't know, a boring documentary? um, but yeah, I think there's something to that. Is difficult situations are actually opportunities to shine, and opportunities to showcase your ability to weather storms, um, which is again a different perspective when viewing difficult situations. And it doesn't mean you're always going to knock it out of the park, but it means that, I don't know, you've gotten a little bit closer to achieving that calmness, and you're pursuing that ability to deal with situations. And so yeah, I like the movie analogy a lot.
Right.
What kind of music is playing in this scene?
There was earlier in my life, I was dealing with some real health challenges. And it's easy when you feel strong to navigate stuff. Um,
Yeah,
but it's harder when you don't, you know? And I remember there was this one app, and I can't remember, I think it still exists, and I think it was called Super Better. What the app does is the app essentially gamifies the challenges that you're having and how to overcome them. And you get points for stuff.
yeah,
So,
yeah,
for me, I had some type of viral pericarditis, and then it just was causing it. So, like, I couldn't walk 10 feet without being winded and feeling like my heart was
mm,
just going to beat, excessively out of my chest. It sucked. It was a horrible experience.
Yeah.
And yet the doctor's like, you need to walk. You need to push yourself to stand up, go down the road and come back. And, I would give myself points for standing up, climbing the stairs. It would feel horrible. Right. Yet when I did that, it made me feel like I was overcoming. And, I could see the points adding up. And it was a motivator for me. Even still, I during that time I had to go on temporary disability, and it was not fun. And it was the only way that I had enough money, because I was really sick and I didn't know when I was getting better and how things were going to go. And I still get emails. I don't know why. It's 12 years later, and they still send me emails about a balance statement from that bank, written in regards to this card. And there's no money in there.
Yeah.
But I don't remove those alerts, because I like to remember how far I've come.
Yeah.
And how much I triumphed over challenges. And that if I can triumph with that, and everything else is easy.
Yeah. That's excellent perspective for sure. And being able to challenge yourself in a way that actually got you up and got you moving, and you accumulated those points. That's genius. And imagine if you kind of took that perspective every day anyway.
Right.
Is how can I level up my character today?
Right.
What tools can I acquire, or what skill set can I improve on? If you pretend life is a video game, it takes the pressure off of difficult situations, because it's just like, oh, this is just a game. I'm like that difficult conversation you have to have. It's like, well, it's going to go good or it's going to go poorly. Let's see what happens. But if you've kind of like separated yourself and are viewing yourself as a character in a game, and trying to level up and trying to achieve your mission and your purpose, and trying to achieve the strongest or most powerful character you can, like what is it that's going to achieve that? Is it, learning new skills and working out and staying healthy, and then when you get beat up by the level boss, and you have to build back up again, it's right. It's attach points to it, and I think it's super smart. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I come home and I sit there and I take value from these, and they inspire me, and that's kind of like, people ask me why I do these podcasts, and like I tell people, because this is stuff that I want to figure out. This is stuff that I want to get down. I want to be the calmest guy in the room, and I'm not. I am definitely not. If someone cuts me off in traffic, I have to work really hard at not flying off the hinges. Not cut off in traffic, but I get really upset when my trigger is when other people put people at danger. And so some guy's driving reckless on the road, that triggers me, because I get angry about this person putting other people's lives in danger. And yet my anger doesn't solve anything. There are ways to handle it.
I 100%. Yeah, exactly. And I think because I deal with similar anger issues, and I have to remind myself that when I get super angry, it's because my expectations have differed from reality. And if I can kind of come back to reality and say, all right, this is what it is. How can I appropriately respond to it? That's usually cools me down. But yeah, I agree. I'm similar.